Today I'm here to present a case study on how to start a wholesale fashion business in Eastern Europe. Now, I didn't have to do this myself, my mother did, and we're actually local, we're from Ukraine. So I will give you an internal perspective on how the market works and how you can penetrate it. And I must tell you in advance, it's quite different from how the fashion industry works here in the UK and in Europe in general. In smaller Eastern European countries, there is pretty much no such concept as a large fashion trade show. So the trade shows tend to be quite small. They're dotted around the countries. Around the country, the attendance can be quite poor, and you're pretty much guaranteed not to get the ideal customer there. So the way it normally works is that there are wholesale markets across, well, in certain locations in the countries. For example, in Ukraine, there's the main wholesale market is in Odessa. It's called the 7th kilometer, and that's where the majority of wholesalers will have permanent offices, where people come and they buy stock on short order. Now, you must keep in mind that the majority of wholesale customers will never make forward orders in Eastern European countries. They prefer to come and buy stock as they see it. They will arrive in their little van, or they will arrange a shipment on the day. They will pick the stock, they'll take it away with them, and that's how it works. So because of that, a lot of brands who originate from Eastern Europe will not even have a proper lookbook or a website or a way of announcing their collection in advance unless they quite high level. And we're talking, the high level would be the likes of Chanel or a massive brand like Levi's. So anyone relatively small will pretty much just have their office, allow people to come in and then sell there and then. So the first thing you should probably look at when trying to integrate your business into Eastern Europe is to find where those wholesale markets are. In Russia, there's a few in Moscow, but again, there will be more in other areas of Russia because it's so large and people would rather not go across the whole country in order to buy their stock. In Poland, I know there's a few in Poland. There will be, in Belarus, there's areas like that as well. So it's pretty much a concept that works on all of ex-Soviet Union area. If you cannot afford to hire an office in one of these areas, it would then make sense to try and find out who your potential customers would be. I know even here in the UK, the customers tend not to do their research and they will just go to the wholesaler they're used to seeing. So if you want to really push your product onto the market, it would make sense to make a list of the customers that you would like to sell your stuff and then go and physically visit them. It is less expensive than it sounds because the salaries for marketing stuff are much lower in the ex-Soviet Union area because, well, the salaries are lower in general. But the market can be surprisingly stronger because people tend to spend a much larger proportion of their salary on goods, and they love luxury and they want to be well dressed, even if it means spending half of their salary sometimes on clothes. It's not something you see as much here in the UK, where people love a bargain. In Ukraine and Russia, in Poland, there is a sense that a woman should be dressed for occasion and that she should present herself. And it's a cultural difference that is quite significant, and that's why a lot of people will think that, oh, I can spot the Eastern Europeans on the street because they dress differently and sometimes a bit more ostentatiously. But it's also a good thing for the market because it means that even though the average salary is lower, people will be spending a high proportion of it on clothes. I'm talking women's wear, obviously, so menswear market will be different, but I haven't been involved in it. So now, Amazon-wise, e-commerce at the moment is still quite weak in Eastern Europe. I know that countries like Belarus might be quite a bit more interesting because it's quite difficult for brands to physically penetrate into these countries, into Belarus, for example. But a lot of people will order from ASOS, they will order from abroad. But then you have the question of how do you pass the customs? How you need to, again, anywhere in Eastern Europe you would need physical representative. In whatever area where you need relations, because you have to take into account that not everything is done officially, and not everything is done according to the rules, and there is no getting away from it. Even the largest brands will have connections in the customs, they will have connections with the shipping companies, and if anything happens, there is someone to sort things out for them, especially when you're talking large volumes. I mean, take, for example, the current situation in Ukraine. The customs are very unstable. There is no shipping going on between Ukraine and Russia. It's impossible to pass. So if you don't have if your shipment gets arrested, for example, and you don't have someone on site to sort it out, which will involve talking to people and finding out who to talk to, you will not be able to figure this out on the phone. You will have lots of problems, and it's a very, very important point, and the same applies to Russia. So a very important bit would be to have a good customs broker from the country where you're planning to ship, and someone who can personally trust, because there's a lot of stories of people sending a shipment and then it gets arrested, somebody takes it, and unless you can absolutely trust the receiving side, you will never see it again. So that's another thing to take into account. Now, when we get to the internet, depending on where you're planning to sell, obviously in places in the capitals, Moscow, Kiev, Warsaw, people are more educated. They will use the internet for shopping. They won't just go high street, but it's still a developing area. So in a lot of places in Russia, for example, in the more remote areas, people will have to rely on intranet rather than internet. So they will not have a global connection. And for you to be able to penetrate those areas, again, you need physical representation there. Otherwise, keep in mind that people don't use Facebook as much as VK, Vkontakte, which is the local social networking website. And if you want to have representation on the social media, you have to look at Vkontakte, you'll have to look at Odnoklassniki, but probably Vkontakte is much better for business. And you have to find out what's more popular in your local country. So I suspect that in countries like Poland or Belarus, it might be something else. Vkontakte mostly applies to Ukraine and Russia.